My name is Tony Lamb. I work at Distributor, and I generally known as that video guy who creates all the content. I'll be your host today. Just trying to keep the energy up, keep the conversations going. The reason why I called this a business chat webinar was we were not going to dive into product.
Anyway, who am I? What the heck? I am a lawyer. Don't hold it against me. Before I was molded into that, I did do a science degree. I did study some computer science. And I then went and joined the Air Force, where I was in uniform for 21 years. I was in the cyber squadron here in the Royal Australian Air Force. And I also had the privilege and honor to serve with the United States JAG Corps in the Pentagon in Washington, DC, although technically the Pentagon's over the river in Virginia. And it was an amazing experience. I got to continue some of that work as well as other international operations work. And I bring that perspective into civilian world now, but always bearing in mind, my little Sun Tzu quote earlier is a bit tongue in cheek, but actually completely relevant. So I guess I like to do everything I can in the prevention space rather than having people end up in my office after breach. It's not pretty.
Tina, tell us a little about you. Everyone on the call should know you.
Hopefully. Well, I'm one of Tony's colleagues. I work at Distributor, originally Express Data. I've been with the business now for almost 8 years now. I started off as the RSA BDM, so my relationship with RSA has gone back a very long way, and I'm really delighted. I've seen it evolve.
Appreciate that, Tina. And last but not least, the warlock of Cypher himself, Craig Dore.
Yes, hello, and thanks everyone for joining. My name's Craig. I'm a veteran cybersecurity guy. I've worked from the world of cryptography and PKI back in the day, back in the era where everyone thought you were going to have a digital certificate on your PC, which never really manifested. And I've worked across the industry spectrum mostly as a vendor, but also as a consultant, trainer, marketing guy, but significant amount of experience in security development and also being a consultant as well. So I've done the full spectrum of all types of customers, all shapes and sizes, from deep security, government interests, all the way to small, 2-people operations. So I've seen it all. 25 years of experience.
Found a lovely article in the Washington Post, and I thought of you straight away, Craig, not because it's a newspaper, but because you said something about cybersecurity ransomware the last time we met, and it was about, critical infrastructure being attacked. This particular article here is saying that a lot of the infrastructure in government states were hit, and they take time to get back. And like any good American article, they do take in food as well, because one of the statements here is the coronavirus pandemic has also supersized the problem. Would you like to supersize my understanding about that critical infrastructure that you thought, if it happened, that'll be the trigger for everyone to kick in, Craig?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good article. I just skimmed it while you were going through that speed reader. The idea of that everyone working at home, the pandemic has had that implication. And one of the pieces that I touched upon on our last chat, Tony, was that there have been a lot of hastily erected systems that were in response to, overnight being ordered to work from home. And organizations' own ability to undertake strategic projects for improvement have been definitely marred by this work from home. You can expect that many major projects are almost near impossible for large, ugly organizations with lots of internal, legacy systems and so on. I think from the perspective of ransomware particularly is the organizations in, wherever they manifest from, where these threat actors are operating out of, they go out and they'll buy access to a lot of these organizations. And there's a type of organization that they go after. And there is a threshold by which it gets them value for their money. So the key threshold is $100 million in revenue. If your organization is operating there or above, you become a target.
Mhm.
And most particularly affected are the UK, Australia, Canada, and of course the US. All of those are basically the top four places where these guys want to target. And as I said earlier, they will buy access in terms of, say, a 0-day vulnerability or exploit. They will purchase that and get the access that they need. It doesn't need to be administrative level because they can triangulate and do what they need to do once they're in.
No, I think this is super important. We'll send this article out as a follow-up as well, because they actually said that in government, budget is given to current things, not things that are business as usual, right? So a lot of the times you don't have the budget to even have the proper tech or even tech to protect the technology you have there. So it becomes fairly complicated. So we'll send that around.
And it's not just about products, right? It's not about having the budget to buy some product that's magically going to solve your problems. The really biggest problem out there is a skill shortage.
And it actually says that in the article as well. So thanks for touching that as well, Craig. So the next part I wanted to actually have a chat about, and this is more directed to you, EJ, because I know in the last couple of weeks, you put a submission into the government about how people should deal with cybersecurity. And if you don't, or you haven't been on this website, it's cyber.gov.au in Australia, I think you should. I think that if you're having conversations with your customers, being on this gives you a lot of ammo about what the government's doing and how to deal with it. Now, if I just scroll down a little bit, the alerts are great. Have a look. Remote code execution or vulnerability on a certain product. I won't name them. You can read it yourself just in case. You don't want to say bad things. And then there's other bits and pieces here that, you need to be aware of. If you're going in and having a chat with somebody or a customer and you need some ammo, what the government's looking at, what you need to prepare for, I think this is a perfect place to start. But the one I wanted to chat on is there is a nice little cybersecurity challenge here where they actually give you a pack. They ask you to look at a memory dump and see what the threat are and what do you do. So I think, the government's going in the right way, but EJ, do you want to enlighten us a little bit of what you said in that proposal and how we as industry and as people can help that conversation go along?
Okay, yeah, thank you. So there was and by the way, ACSC also allows organizations to partner with them. So it might be worth looking at the criteria for that for wherever you're dialing in from, just in terms of my law firm is a partner and we just get advance notice of some of the threats and things. And get included in other conversations. So that's really worthwhile as well. So another little pitch for the old ACSC. So there was a call for views by the Department of Home Affairs about proposed cybersecurity regulation. And even saying cybersecurity regulation as a proposal already puts into the mind of people in our industry, there's going to be some laws, there's going to be some rules, how's that going to affect things, what's going to change. And Australia is still very much out on a limb really when it comes to, for example, ransomware. We don't have a register of who has paid. We don't have any laws against paying ransomware. There's some advisories if companies bother to look for them. And this is really interesting when you put it back into that term you mentioned earlier, Tony and Craig, critical infrastructure. So in a scenario, let's just use the pandemic because, gosh, I don't know how many of us are locked in their houses right now. It's relevant still. So an urgent and an unexpected somewhat situation arrives into a country, and we'll use Australia as the nation state in this scenario, where now a vast proportion of your population are frightened. People are dying, and the government has to make a few decisions straight away about what is essential, because that's the only reason I'm going to let you leave your house right now. What's essential? And then we go, probably need to eat, drink, right, and breathe air. Those three things would be kind of essential. Mm-hmm. So the government goes, all right, well, it's a pandemic, it's an airborne virus, so you're going to have to wear a mask when you go out. You can only go out to shop. You can't browse. Don't stroll up and down the aisles of IKEA. Just in and out, get your groceries, because you need these things to live. Okay. So now we have an idea of what essential is that we might not have had pre-pandemic. That's great. How do I look at that through a critical infrastructure lens, much less the lens of what regulations might I need in industry going forward? I'm painting a scenario. Thank you for your indulgence, team. So now I'm allowed to go down to the supermarket to buy essential food for my family. And look, this is the sort of stuff that military is trained for all the time, but this is now something affecting everybody in the population. So I can go into the supermarket, but I shouldn't really be loitering in the pot and pan aisle. I shouldn't be deciding on a new type of laundry detergent. It's kind of the government saying get in and out, get what you essentially need. Let's say for me, my essentials might be the English variety of Heinz baked beans on toast with butter. So I now have 3 items I need to purchase. I want butter, I want nice beans from Heinz, and I want some bread. Okay, so they're my 3 essential items. I've gone in, and in the aisle where the baked beans are usually sitting in a tin, there's just a pot of stinking cold beans dripping down the shelf. And why am I putting this image in your head? Because I want you to think of everything that went into getting that bean on the shelf, not just the growers, not just the pickers, not just the people that flavor and cook them, but the tin, the sterilizing process, the mining, the paper label, everything that goes into putting my tin of beans onto the shelf. Now, government says it's okay for me to purchase them. That's an essential need. Which part of that baked bean process is now critical infrastructure for me in a pandemic? So Department of Home Affairs, to their credit, came out with this call for views about cybersecurity regulations. And as lawyers, we look at regulation as a double-edged sword. So it's wonderful to actually have black and white regulations that say, all right, if you're a company and your annual revenue is whatever, 2 billion or more, you're going to report every time you pay ransomware. That's now a new law. Here it is. That's easily one of the proposals. The flip side of that is now we know who's paying ransomwares, and we also may start to discover what their vulnerabilities are. So it was a nuanced thing to respond to, and I did it sort of with the team that I have at the Australasian Cyber Law Institute, which is a not-for-profit that exists to really look at this piece where cyber connects to law and connects to ethics, because it's affecting us all now. This is all affecting us now.
It sounds like that could be a webinar unto itself.
Yeah, I need to stop. I get a little excited.
As the hostmaster, I stop thee now.
You did ask about breakfast. I mean, to be fair,
Craig, do you have any comments with what EJ just said, sir?
Well, I can say that I appreciated EJ's the way that she looks at things is not just the thing. She looks at it from end to end outside of that thing, and seeing it from the supply chain side all the way out to the delivery side. I think one of the main issues in the pandemic is that it has exposed the frailties and shortcomings of systems that have been placed and that we've taken for granted for many, many years. Everything from cyber to our own logistics, our supply chains, the way that we manufacture, the places that we manufacture. And I'll just highlight Michael Osterholm is a viral disease expert from the US who wrote in 2016 about single sourcing of our critical medicines that are literally on the crash cart in the hospital. He wrote about this in 2016. Well, here we are, 2020, when it hit, that single source from which critical medicines were all produced in one place, and that place was basically ground zero. And so the idea of exposing those frailties and having an implication that is going to basically resound into the future is absolutely true from a pandemic perspective. You can flip it over from the cyber. And I've already said that many organizations ran around erecting systems to deal with the pandemic and the work from home aspect very hastily. And I think many of them are still at risk because of it.
It's interesting. You guys just blew my mind, and I say that a lot because I don't know much. But when we talk about business outcomes, we usually talk about, let's say, for instance, I used to sell a lot of cloud. I used to say, from the time you log in to your productivity tools to when you talk to your customer. I think what you guys just touched on is a little bit more deeper than that. It's sort of like, okay, outside of the realm of what we take care of, what does it affect as well? And I think that's a greater conversation. I think I really would like to touch on that a little bit more, particularly if we have more time in another setting. But the last thing I wanted to show everybody, and if you don't already know about this, this particular website here, and I know that EJ probably knows more about it than I do, is the OAIC website. So you would have known back in, I think it was 2018, they put the notifiable data breach legislation in. So if anything happens, you go to this website and you put it in. And this is the parent website that you need to know. And the greatest thing about this, and I always love putting up a chart, a pie chart, and otherwise makes me feel very important about myself, is you can actually see that they do have stats for us to understand. Let me try to get onto this particular report. And I'm not really interested in the old one. I'm interested in the latest one. And this is the preface of this particular webinar. I want to go through some of these stats, and I want you to comment on this. We see that, the reporting is down 16%. Is that because people are used to it and they're just trying to get away with it, or the threat's down? I don't think the threats are down. I think we might be more wary of it, and we're trying to do the best we can. And I think that is probably more the truth. I think health service providers here are getting hit a lot, and this is publicly available, guys. So if you will send it to you via the follow-up email, but super interesting to send towards any particular customers to have a chat about what they're up to and what they need to do under these circumstances. You'll see there finance is right up there with regards to the top data breaches that have been notified. I don't particularly like this 65% of data breaches affected 100 people or fewer, because 90% of our population, or 90% of our businesses in Australia are like 4 and below. So it's not really that telling, I'm going to be honest with you. But the one thing I wanted to really hone on is sources of data breaches. Malicious criminal attack is 65%, system fault, and human error. The best thing about the breaches with regards to human error is because they know what happened. So a little bit later down here, they actually tell you what were those faults. Personal information emailed to wrong person. Easy, I've done it before. Hopefully you're not giving away private information. A big no-no, right? Fail to use BCC when emailing. Easy one. Sent to wrong person and things like that. But most importantly that I wanted to talk about here is 43% of all data breaches resulted from incidences. Now look on the right-hand side in the blue and the dark yellow. Phishing, compromised credentials. Yeah, 30%. Compromised stolen credentials, 27%. Now that's over 50% with regards to just identity alone. Right. I started my career as a Wintel Citrix engineer. We logged in with a username and password. It was a strong pass. I thought it was awesome. Use secure ID or tokens back then through the secure gateway. I don't think many people still use those same levels of things at the moment. And we're still complaining about 57% of those particular threats. Now, Craig, I'm going to touch on that a bit with you. I know that it doesn't get rid of all the threats when we do MFA and all the other advanced things we do, but what do you think are the key things that people should absolutely do under the circumstance that with that data you see here, sir?
I'll answer your question, but first I'll just express some appreciation for the detail in this infographic. So thanks for finding that. I love that they characterize what a breach is and what the source of that breach is. Mm-hmm. And now one of the aspects, and you're touching on it now, is that phishing and compromised credentials represent a good proportion of the breaches, excluding human error, which we all know is part of it. I think one of the big surprises is that phishing is super easy to do. Organizations or threat actors who want to perpetrate this, the tool sets are there for them to fire and forget. They can stand up some fake domain that looks like a real one and trick users. There are technologies that combat phishing that make it categorically impossible for that to occur. And what is surprising to me is that a lot of organizations do not adopt those. Simply put, MFA or multi-factor, two-factor isn't necessarily going to protect you from phishing, because the real-time nature of entering in a code, a special code, to access a service run by a business can be replayed by a malicious actor in real time. And so second factor is a good thing to do, but I would have a very, very good look at FIDO technologies and the hardware devices that enact them. Second thing is, what would I do, or what is my response to this is, what if I had a limited budget and limited time and resources under this pandemic? I would look at privileged access first, divide and conquer. The privileged applications, the privileged users, even if they're non-IT people, those are the ones that I would target first for additional set of protections to access critical functions. And that's my response to your question.
And I appreciate that. And the interesting thing that I learned from you ladies and gents last time we spoke is some of this stuff's been around forever, but we still keep ignoring it. And EJ, I'm going to pass this question over to you. And we do have a question from the crowd. Is ignorance or lack of action okay to say in court when something happens?
Absolutely. If you're going 100 kilometers an hour in a 40K zone, the police officer is just going to say, oh, you didn't know? Fine, keep your license, keep driving. Not. Ignorance is not an excuse. So it's possible there are businesses out there that aren't aware of the Notifiable data breaches scheme in Australia, but I think everyone's heard of GDPR. And the thing is, for a lot of the organizations in Australia is they're actually dealing with Europe, or they're dealing with America, and they may not realize it's not just this scheme they need to be aware of, but they may need to be aware of more strict privacy regimes than this one. Mm-hmm. So that's number one. Sorry for the joke, but ignorance will not be an excuse. You don't have to be an organization that hits the 3 million turnover criteria for reporting to the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner if you have certain sensitive data. So, for example, the reason I think we see a lot of breaches for the medical sector isn't just that they're bad at this, and I'm not saying they are, it's because they're instantly reportable. All of our medical information is what's, sensitive for a reporting point of view. And I think for other organizations, a lot of them are misguided as to whether they realize they have sensitive data to report. So ignorance is no excuse. What does that mean? If you're hearing for the first time, or the person that you may be a vendor for is hearing for the first time that they may actually be subject to the data breaches scheme, what does it mean? What do I need to do? And I think the first thing I like to tell clients is, why are you storing any of this data? Do you even need it? And do you have a system or a set of policies for reviewing the data that you have? If you've got data that's over 7 years old or 9 years old, depending what kind of data it is, why do you still have it? Because it is now a burden. It makes you a big, soft and large target. So just, understanding why you have it, and then understanding that it's costing you. So I think one of the misconceptions is, oh, it's so cheap, data storage, the cloud, I'll just keep it all because it's just easier and safer. Actually, you're just making yourself a bigger target. So
I've probably only got about 10 more minutes, and I said that, we're going to do this lovely role play. So Craig, please entertain me. You're the CIO of an insurance company. What is the most important thing that comes to your mind? That's the first question. And secondly, if the board came back to you and said, you're spending too much at 5.7% of our revenue to do security, what would you do to convince them otherwise?
Well, you could Google and get the phone book back around the cost of a breach. Just implications of a breach from a reputational loss alone can sink your stock price. So that's a fairly easy dimension of the conversation. Mm-hmm. The second one is, if I were in the position where my budget was reduced for whatever reason, as the chief information security person, I would basically be forced to focus on privileged access first, and ensuring that threats are mitigated through whatever tool set that supports that mitigation. And so privilege first is really where I take it. Smart segregation is another one. Basics around cybersecurity using the ASD's Essential 8 or the top 35, absolutely. And so that when you do that stuff, the basics with a limited budget, that's where you can start, is divide and conquer privilege action.
EJ, you're a lawyer. You've now been promoted to operations manager at a medical center. You have doctors, nurses, you got to do contact tracing. What would be the most important thing to you, given your background, what they need to look at if a board pulls you and say, hey, if I was ransomware, are we safe? What would your comments be in that boardroom?
Thank you. That's interesting and actually relevant. The medical community has formed a great part of my client base this year, and all on prevention, which is wonderful. So realizing they've got these crown jewels, whether they want to or not, statutorily here in Australia, that PII or P2, as you've now coined the phrase, Tony, I like it. That's with love. They have no choice. It's medical data, and it will be treated accordingly. So they need to again step back and look at this whole picture. Why are we taking the data? Is the data we're taking subject to anything? Yes, it is. How are we managing it? And there's almost two sides to this coin. And those graphics you showed earlier, again, the tech, was it like there was just this 5% problem with tech? Mm-hmm. However, you need to enable your ICT team with the tools and the policies to do their job, whitelist, blacklist, everything else. And then you need the policies and the training to get through your human chain and understanding actually they are your key. They are your key to security, and having each human on board with it. So, in some of my conversations with some of these medical providers, it's about seeing it as a story. Your employees are on a story. They're on a journey with you. And from the minute they walk in, how did you induct them? How did you make them feel part of this place? Did you show them the front door and the back door and the toilets? And did you do the equivalent from a security perspective? And give them the understanding of why. Say, oh, well, there was this breach to an identical organization and this is what happened. And just include them in, more or less like this. It's all about understanding. Once you have the sort of storyline of employees on board, they're a lot more engaged. It's not just being told you must, wear a mask without understanding the policy and the reason behind it. It's saying, look, you must use this method of authentication because 12 other similar products, firms to us, this is what happened. They were socially engineered, they were phished, they were ransomed. And had they used this properly, it wouldn't have occurred. And at the end of the day, don't you want to have a place that's paying you and have a job, because we're all doing this together. There's no one higher or lower in this train. The reason that cybercrime works is because, I think I said this in the last one, because we're mammals.
Because it works.
It's successful, best business model ever. Is that what you're saying? It
really is. We're going to fall for the crying baby every time. So knowing that, let's play that game and treat every human as your biggest strength, not actually the biggest weakness, and have that backed by an ICT team who know what the heck they're doing, who have the funding to do what they're doing, and more importantly, have the correct tools.
My name is Tony Lamb. I work at Dicadata, and I'm generally known as that video guy who creates all the content. I'll be your host today. Just trying to keep the energy up, keep the conversations going.